So I'm hearing in the referendum a lot of controversy about whether or not we actually send 350 million to the EU every week.
Well, this £350 million figure, or generally however much we spend to send to the EU every week, is a matter of great controversy. And the two campaigns differ greatly on this. Vote Leave, on the one hand, cites this £350 million a week figure based upon the financial contributions that we make every week to the European Union. Remain counter that and say that that's not a true figure, that in fact it's £248 million that we are sending every week. Now this is because we get what's called a rebate, or better known as an abatement, where we get a reduction upon our payments.
So the controversy is really all about the rebate.
You're absolutely right, and the problem here is that the formula that calculates the rebate, or otherwise known as the abatement, is actually so complex, and you'll be able to see that it is really complex. The rebate isn't actually getting money back. It's money deducted based upon the budget calculated 4 years before the formula is applied. Very few people actually understand it. Now, it's fair that we in the UK actually get a rebate, because the EU's tariff tax is partly based on tariffs based upon food from outside the European Union. Now, we buy a lot more food from outside the European Union, so therefore we pay a lot more. Now, some of the European countries actually get a rebate on our rebate. However, France does not get such a rebate, but Germany does.
So Vote Leave are wrong then? It's not actually 350 million per week?
Well, it's not actually quite that straightforward. The payments to the EU are made on a monthly basis. It's worth noting that payments to the EU are not approved by Parliament. The government cannot even stop them. Under the European Communities Act, the payments are made outside of democratic control by civil servants. Some have sought to justify the £350 million a week figure by saying that it's under EU control. That's not quite true, because the rebate is still fixed in law and not managed by the EU. It's determined by a formula, as you know.
Don't we get something back from the EU?
Yes, the EU spends in the UK. This amounts to about £4.5 billion a year. But here's the rub. When the EU spends money, they take all the glory and put a big EU flag on things. Most of our projects actually have to match the spending.
So to get any part of our money back, we have to spend again?
Yes, we are paying twice for EU funding, but that's not the only thing.
So what is the full story?
Actually, the cost of the taxpayer exceeds the payments made to the EU each month.
Explain?
Well, certain items that we have to pay for because of our membership of the EU are not included in our regular payments to the EU.
Such as?
When the EU overspends on projects, admin, whatever that may be, and runs out of cash, they can and do demand more. The UK has to pay up even when it exceeds the budget amount. You may remember when the EU said it wanted an extra £1.7 billion, the UK had to pay up. If the EU overspends on Galileo, their military satellite navigation system, we will have to pay. The European Central Bank has called up British funds, the Bank of England, as part of the European system of central banks. The European Investment Bank has a call on our money. British taxpayers have already had to pay. These costs go to the public sector borrowing requirement. We have had to pay for the EU's European Financial Stability Mechanism, bailing out the euro, been pressurised into giving more money to the IMF to deal with the debts of banks in the Eurozone. This has amounted to many, many tens of billions of pounds.
So this is all on top of our monthly, not just weekly payments?
Yes, but it can be even worse. This is all in the research we have done. We are on the hook for the EU's debts. We are liable on a joint and several basis. Their debt is our debt. If they cannot pay, we have to pay. If we don't, it would damage the UK's credit rating.
So we are liable for the EU's debts?
Yes, and to make matters even more dire for the British taxpayer, EU institutions like the European Investment Bank and the Euro bailout schemes use our good credit rating to borrow money from the international finance markets. So when this all blows up, as it will, we will have to pay, and if we don't, international financial institutions would consider us in default. That will damage our credit rating and raise our borrowing costs and interest rates. So yes, it is wrong to say that we hand over £350 million per week, and it is not correct to justify it by saying that they are referring to the money controlled by the EU, because that figure is even higher. In fact, it could be a gross underestimation. When you add it all up, we could be paying more. From a financial perspective, we are safer leaving, but that's not why we're leaving. We should not have to be bribed with our own money. Basically, we want to run our own affairs. The fact that a taxpayer is safer once we have done so is a bonus.